Hello, everyone. This is Heather Hyman from Maryland Volunteer Lawyer Service, and I am so excited that you are able to join us today for a continuation of our quarterly webinar series that is hosted by the Human Trafficking Prevention Project, which is a partnership between University of Baltimore School of Law and Maryland Volunteer Lawyer Service. We have a number of people joining right now, so we are going to jump right in because we do have a lot of exciting and interesting material to cover today. I am very excited to have on the phone with me for this presentation my colleague and the director of the Human Trafficking Prevention Project, Jessica Emerson from University of Baltimore. And I'd really like to extend a very warm welcome to our guest presenter, Amy Hennon from the Maryland Volunteer Lawyer Service. Amy is the Director of Advocacy and Financial Stabilization at our agency, where she provides mentoring for volunteer attorneys, and she oversees MVLS's workforce, consumer, and housing initiatives. Amy previously worked for Maryland Legal Aid, and prior to that, worked as a debt collection attorney. So we have a lot of expertise from a lot of different viewpoints. So welcome so much, Amy, for being with us today. In Amy's spare time, she provides volunteer tax preparation and financial coaching through the Cash Campaign of Maryland, and she holds a Juris Doctor from the University of Maryland Francis King Carey School of Law. So welcome to you both.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Heather.
So our agenda today, it's brief, but we're going to try to dive in deep on looking at consumer issues and how they intersect with the world of human trafficking, and really trying to look at how we can identify consumer issues that survivors might be grappling with, and then what tools you can access, what advice you can give, what resources you can connect survivors to take steps to address any of the consumer issues that they might be facing. So you can see from our agenda, we'll be looking at that intersection first, then move on to advice for assisting trafficking survivors. We'll talk about some strategies for rebuilding credit. And then at the end, we have a case scenario for discussion, but we actually will be giving you that case scenario here in the beginning, so that you can think about it as we're going through all of the rest of the information during the presentation. Before we jump into that, though, I do want to hand it off to Amy to just give us an overview of what is consumer law.
Thanks, Heather. I appreciate the opportunity to be here so very much. Consumer law is something I am deeply passionate about, and one of the really interesting things about consumer law is that most people don't necessarily realize that they have a consumer law issue. They think that maybe they have a money issue, and really what it is that there is an underlying legal issue that could benefit from either assistance from an attorney or kind of considering other options that might be available. And consumer law can look like a number of different things. And so this is the things that you might obviously think about that have to do with debt collection. It would potentially have to do with it would certainly have to do with your credit and the various consumer reporting agencies out there. But having your credit rating can actually impact your ability to get an apartment. It can impact your ability to get a job. Some employers pull credit reports, and people with lower credit scores often have both a higher interest rate that they have to pay when they borrow money, and also potentially a higher rate that they have to pay when they get, say, car insurance, because insurance companies often pull a credit report as well. People often think about bankruptcy when they think about consumer law, but there are all these sort of collateral consequences that are or these sort of tied in things that maybe people don't always think about, because there's the criminal law context with bail bonds. People get a bail bond in order to get either themselves or a family member out of jail, but then there's suddenly a debt that's owed to the bail bond company, and there can be a lot of negative consequences that come with that. And debts owed to, say, a state agency can result in things like having your tax refund seized. And also there's an obvious impact with both mortgages and being able to get an apartment, but there can also be the sort of collection side of both of those things after you move out. And so it can take a number of different, it can look a number of different things. But the real truth of it is when your eyes are sort of open to it, you suddenly see consumer law issues everywhere you look.
Thank you, Amy. And before we jump into a case scenario or two, I just wanted to let everyone know that we are happy to field questions throughout the webinar. I will be keeping an eye on the chat where you can feel free to pose questions throughout, and we'll take pauses to answer any questions you might have. As you can see from this slide, there is a lot of potential material we are going to be trying to touch on today. Of course, we will be able to do a kind of a high-level overview, but there's a lot more information to access. And I would encourage everyone to download the PDF of this presentation. There's an additional handout in the materials provided for this webinar as well. And we will be following up next week with a whole bunch of supplementary material that you can review that will give you some more guidance on these different issues. So jumping into our first case scenario. This is a case scenario that's put together from a lot of the experiences that we've seen from clients that come through the Human Trafficking Prevention Project. I'll preface this scenario by saying that almost every time I meet with someone who might be seeking help from MVLS or the HTPP for criminal record help or for family law help or whatever it is they need assistance with, I always try to bring the conversation around to consumer issues because I find that almost everyone, like Amy said, is grappling with these issues. They are truly everywhere. So we're not going to analyze what's in the case scenario right now, but let's keep this in mind as we go through the rest of the presentation. So Dee started dating Keith when she was 23 and he was 28. They soon moved in together. Keith asked Dee to put her name on a lease as he had poor credit. She had a reliable job at a local retailer. Dee paid for most of the rent and the utilities, but she did not mind as Keith claimed he was just in between jobs and would soon be back on his feet. After a few months, Keith began to become controlling and abusive. He started telling Dee she was worthless, that no one would ever love her or care for her, and began hitting and choking her during fights. Dee, a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, became depressed and isolated from her friends and family. Dee and Keith both used heroin and pills, and Dee coped with the increasing violence and abuse through more frequent drug use. After Dee lost her job due to her increased drug use, Keith began pressuring her to make money to support their basic needs and drug habit by trading sex. He put up a profile for Dee on Craigslist and arranged for her to go on dates with men that contacted them online. He used Dee's driver's license and information to rent hotel rooms where she would meet the dates, but he would make her hand over all the money to him. If Keith felt that Dee did not make enough money from the dates he arranged, he would become violent, and Dee received medical treatment at the emergency room of a local hospital or urgent care center after a few of the violent incidents. After 2 years of being with Keith, Dee sought help with her drug use and went to an inpatient treatment program. While there, she was screened for human trafficking and referred to a local services agency for counseling and shelter. Dee's now living at the shelter and beginning to look for employment. She's concerned that Keith might have used her driver's license and other identity documents, and she owes money to her landlord for the apartment she was renting with Keith. What potential consumer issues does Dee have? And we're also thinking about what additional information you might want to know from her and how to get that information to help her if you are advocating for this survivor.
Hi, everybody. This is Jess Emerson. Just want to say thank you to MBLS for this again. I promised I would only wax poetic during one particular slide. This happens to be the one. And I just really want to emphasize the importance of this. As several of you who are on the listserv or on the Maryland Human Trafficking listserv this morning saw me type. This really has been transformative for me, just even prepping for this presentation, because I realized a glaring absence in my work with survivors that has spanned, close to 20 years at this point. And so I really hope that everybody kind of passes this information along and makes it a part of the work that they do, because, as we can see from this slide, survivors obviously are commonly trapped in cycles of violence, poverty, and debt, but really increasing a survivor's financial and economic stability is really key to them moving forward with their lives. And, just again, speaking from 20 years of doing this work, I never thought that I needed to kind of think about this. And as Amy and Heather shared, once you see this, it's everywhere, and I think that we all at this point understand that we need to look at survivors' criminal records in order to be able to assist them with stability. But I am 100% convinced that this is kind of the next frontier of that. So what Amy and Heather are going to be talking about going forward is really about survivor-centered advocacy for consumer issues. And this needs to include a full and open assessment of someone's financial situation, a discussion of their current, past, and future plans or wishes, because as the previous slide detailed, getting an apartment, getting a job, all of the things that we know survivors want to do are linked to their financial stability. As with everything, you need to provide information about somebody's options, which obviously includes a referral to the Maryland Volunteer Lawyer Service, support survivors in assessing their options and their potential impacts on their own safety, which we'll get into a little bit more going forward, and really just focusing on giving tools and resources to survivors for access. Because when we kind of look at survivors as in a silo where they don't have criminal records and they don't have consumer law issues, we're really doing them a disservice, and we're not providing the type of holistic services and holistic treatment that survivors deserve. So I really hope that you enjoy this presentation going forward.
And I just want to give a shout out to an agency that is doing an amazing job on this issue. It's the Center for Survivor Agency and Justice. And they actually did a presentation on consumer issues at the 2020 Freedom Network Conference. And this presentation is informed by some of the information that they shared, and we are going to be sharing some of their resources later in the presentation. And just to continue on with what Jess was talking about, we really want everyone to think a little bit more in depth about what consumer issues might look like in a human trafficking case. And there were three things we wanted to point out. First, that survivors might have debt that they're still grappling with from prior to their trafficking experience. We know that traffickers target individuals that are in vulnerable situations, that might be dealing with financial insecurity, and that promise of security of being taken care of is one way that they might groom a potential victim. So we need to keep in mind that if we're working with someone who is from a vulnerable population, or a population that's made vulnerable by systemic injustice, that's probably already impacted their financial security. And so there may be things for their trafficking experience that we need to be looking at as well. Survivors are likely going to be experiencing coerced debt, fraud, potentially identity theft, among other types of economic abuses during their victimization. And this can be, this doesn't necessarily happen to everyone, but I will say of the individuals I've worked with, it is a very, very common theme. And again, just like criminal record relief, I think that this aspect of the coercion and abuse that an individual suffers is sometimes not looked at so closely in our rush to meet the survivor's immediate safety, mental health, medical health, other needs. And this can really lead to a compounding effect of victimization. It's really going to impact somebody's ability to move forward with their life, secure a job, access credit, do things that we might think of as a normal part of getting up on your feet again, or whatever way a survivor is trying to move forward with their lives. And there also might be the the potential for more future debt that we also need to keep in mind if someone requires healthcare or other services. And this is a slide that just has a few short scenarios that kind of explains how someone might be accruing debt kind of throughout their entire life, including during their time being trafficked. I'm not going to read these, or actually I'll read these out loud, but I just want, again, these are putting thoughts into your head about people that you might have worked with, and if you see similarities, we hope that this is going to resonate with you and help you identify people that might need help with consumer issues in the future. So Jesse has student loans, federal and private, from the 2 years that they attended college just before they were trafficked. Sylvia had her driver's license and social security card taken by her trafficker, and she believes he applied for and used credit cards in her name. Deshauna was arrested for drug possession and trespassing and incarcerated while being trafficked. She posted bail through a bail bondsman. She's currently at a shelter and has been unable to pay this back. The bail company went to court and obtained a body attachment arrest order for her due to the unpaid debt. So our next slide is looking at economic damage to survivors. And, we've touched on this already, but that economic abuse can really be a core component of a trafficking survivor's experiences. And I think I'm going to actually hand this off to Jess to talk about a little bit more, particularly just flagging some other remedies that might be available under federal law.
Right. So, excuse me. We all as service providers really need to recognize that economic abuse is a core component of a trafficking survivor's experience. And this is defined as behaviors that control an individual's ability to acquire, use, and maintain economic resources, threatening their economic security and potential for self-sufficiency. And, not to kind of toot the work that we do, but, one of the things that we commonly see, unfortunately, in terms of criminal records for survivors is criminal complaints and convictions relating to tax fraud, relating to, different economic challenges. So, this is not just something that is kind of existing in a survivor's day-to-day life. This is something that is also giving them a criminal record. We're working with a survivor right now, actually, who was convicted of economic related offenses because her trafficker had her basically paying for, or had her credit used to fraudulently obtain cars and houses and all kinds of different things. And, I really didn't think about the need to talk about this with clients that I've worked with. One of the things that you need to know about working with survivors as far as protections that exist under the TVPA, one of which is restitution. And this is defined as the full amount of the victim's losses for the value of their services or labor. So this is really about what were they not paid when they were doing the things that they were doing in terms of the labor that they were expending. Restitution is an interesting piece of law in that it really is available to anyone who has been trafficked, even if, actually, no, let me stop that. For clients who have traffickers who are prosecuted on the federal level, restitution is considered, or legally is mandatory. And unfortunately, there's so few prosecutors who actually request restitution. And then even more unfortunately, there's so few survivors who have situations where they're actually able to be paid. But that is something that, you kind of need to know, especially if your client is in a position where their trafficker is being prosecuted. Civil damages is everything else. So this is pain and suffering, essentially, right? So any victim of trafficking who has a trafficker who can be held civilly liable is able to put together, a case under the TVPA in order to compensate them for everything else. And again, this is really about all of the other things. This is not about the value of their labor. This is about compensation for all the things that they have lost or the things that they will suffer in the future. So it's really important to, as you're working with survivors, to think about whether or not these two different remedies are a potential for your client. The person who is, or the organization that is the lead on this is the Human Trafficking Legal Center in Washington, D.C. under Martina Vandenberg. So if you believe that the survivor you're working for might be eligible for either of these protections, I would encourage you to get in touch with us and we can link you with Martina. Yeah, that's it.
I think the reason that this is so important is just it's another avenue for offering some
Yes.
path towards economic stabilization for survivors. So, that's why I wanted to throw this in there to again reiterate this is a remedy that's available.
Yeah, and I like the way that Martina talks about these type of remedies. That's saying you want to give a survivor a nest egg, to be able to move forward, because so often survivors find themselves in a place of financial desperation, and that's totally separate from all of these consumer issues. So these two remedies are real possibilities for folks to be made more whole than they were prior to their experience.
And moving on to red flags. This first slide looking at red flags is compilation of, I think, things that Jess and I in particular see very, very often when we are meeting with individuals that we're helping through the Human Trafficking Prevention Project. And these are the things as advocates, as attorneys, that I would encourage you to listen for, even before you're doing any kind of formal screening, because these are all things that indicate to me there may be some debt, there may be economic challenges for the survivor, there may be consumer issues that we need to look to more closely. So the first thing is if somebody shares that they have unpaid bills or receiving calls from creditors. It's a huge flag. And of course, that would immediately lead me to saying we need to look closer into your credit and talk a little bit more about what you owe. If someone mentions that they had interrupted or unfinished schooling or even finished schooling, student loan debt can be a huge hurdle for people trying to move forward with their lives. And so this would lead me to ask some more questions about, what had happened with the schooling situation and were their loans taken out? If someone has said that they had hospitalizations, emergency room visits, if they needed treatment for, injuries they suffered during their trafficking experience or prior, due to some kind of accident or some experience that they had, we want to have a handle on whether they have medical debt. And just to note, in the handouts for this webinar that you can access through GoToWebinar, there is a fact sheet about hospital bills that is a very useful guide, and Amy will talk about this a little bit more when we're looking at how to address debt. You can also look at open or closed civil cases in Maryland Judiciary Case Search. One of the first things I do, because of course we're focused on criminal records, is to look up a client in Maryland Judiciary Case Search. And in addition to looking at criminal and traffic matters, I also look and see if there's civil matters and do a quick glance to see if there's anything, has the individual been sued? Are there any, civil actions that we can ask more information about and review the documents in Judiciary Case Search to see if we might be able to provide some help.
And Heather, this is really the piece of the work, just because I hate to say it, it's so easy to look on Maryland Judiciary Case Search. And so I immediately look at the criminal record, right? And I immediately look at the traffic record because there are things that can be expunged. And I have neglected looking at open or closed civil cases in Case Search. And so this is really something that I will be building into my practice purposefully going forward. So I just want to thank you for making that point clear, because I think that we have done a good enough job that folks are always looking at their clients' criminal records, but I don't think that we've really been talking about their civil cases in Case Search.
And I can't tell you how many times I've looked with people and we've seen things like, a suit from a former landlord or from a credit agency or, things that open up those discussions later down the road.
There's a million different cases going through my head, just knowing exactly what you just said.
So I also listen to hear if an individual I'm working with expresses doubt they'll be able to get a lease for an apartment, for a car, that they'll be unable to get a car loan or purchase a car. Again, anything that might be just a general flag for some financial insecurity or concerns with credit could be an indicator. And of course, as Amy already touched on a bit before, if somebody has been arrested and got out on bail, if they signed or co-signed a bail bond, these are something that we very frequently see with the survivors that we are working with that could be indicative of a consumer issue and of debt that somebody's grappling with.
And Heather, just to kind of add to the whole vacatur world or the criminal record relief world, I have, again, not connected it to consumer challenges, but I have used those records that, for a survivor who posted bail for their trafficker as evidence that they were trafficked. So that's another thing to think of, kind of if you're doing this work.
So in one of the things that I always think about whenever I am kind of trying to figure out, can I help somebody with a consumer issue? I remember that often consumer issues are just not the first thing that is going to be, that is on their sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, except for all of their legal issues. Consumer law issues are almost never going to be at the very top. And it may be the case that having a conversation about some of these things will be just, maybe they won't be ready to deal with them or tackle them, but they might reach out again later in order to work on those sorts of things. And that is something that is often the case with coerced debt. That part of that is because there's not a lot of great options when there is coerced debt. And coerced debt is when you have debt that someone has taken on, and you see this in human trafficking situations, in domestic violence situations, and all kinds of situations where threat, fraud, force, somebody has taken on debt that they didn't actually intend to take on. And it can look like a lot of different things. If somebody has put a deed to a home or a title to a car in their name or in somebody else's name, or they have taken a loan in their name, or opened a credit card, or any of these sorts of things, opened a bank account in their name for somebody else, and there are all these sort of things that can come out of that, and negative impacts, especially with ability to even open a future bank account if they have a handful of negative accounts that were negative and then closed, that can negatively impact their ability to open a bank account again in the future. Co-signing for any debt, it can potentially have been coerced. And the thing that people don't realize about co-signing for debt is that you're 100% the same amount liable for the debt that you co-signed for, the same way that the other person is. And so if the person who people often think, oh, I was the secondary person, or I was the second person on that signed for this debt. And so they think I've had clients say to me before, I was the second person, so I was only saying that this person would pay back the debt. But what they've actually done is say, if this person does not repay the debt, I will repay it. And so anytime that's the case, that could be potentially a sign of coerced debt. And then certainly taking out a bail bond for somebody else, or co-signing for a bail bond. And bail bonds companies are actually rather notorious for looking to get just anyone that they can find that is a friend, a family member, whoever they can get, that will also co-sign onto a bail bond, because they want to be able to go after as many people as possible in order to be able to collect on the bail debt.
And Amy, I want to just refer our listeners back to that, I think, third bullet point that talks about potential tax liability. We did a webinar a couple of months ago on the intersection between tax and human trafficking. So if anybody has any additional questions about that, I would definitely refer them to that particular webinar, because I've worked with numerous clients who have had tax liability stemming from their trafficking situation. So we already have something loaded up and a worksheet that folks can look at.
So identity theft can happen in a lot of different ways. It can obviously be with getting your Social Security card stolen, getting your getting your driver's license taken from you, getting or having somebody use your credit, and there are these can be hard to tackle, especially with identity theft. It really requires a lot of record keeping, a lot of higher level thinking and tracking and continuous pursuit of getting an issue resolved, and having to do the same thing over and over again. And so it can be a deeply frustrating process, especially for somebody who's dealing with trauma, but also potentially re-traumatizing. How you might potentially spot an identity theft issue would look a bunch of different ways. If someone is trying to get their identity documents back, maybe they need to go to the Social Security Administration because they can't order a new one online or over the phone because the address that's associated with them is some other address. And identity theft issues actually create all of these sort of these record keeping related problems because because everything that's associated with your name is no longer correct, or a lot of things associated with them. One of the biggest things that I have seen over and over again is that somebody cannot get BGE or other utilities in their own name, and this is because somebody else took out. They owe a large balance to their utility provider because somebody else took it out in their name at some point previously. And these can be really, really frustrating to deal with, especially if folks don't want to potentially pursue getting a police report to deal with that. Sometimes the only option are things like bankruptcy. One of the other sort of big flags for identity theft issues is payday loans. And this is because payday loan lenders are notorious for, once you have taken out a payday loan and potentially either paid it or not repaid it, they then sell all of your information, including your Social Security number, including your name, your address, all that kind of stuff, to scammers. And these scammers are often outside the United States. Getting jurisdiction over them is really difficult, but they will call and harass in order to try to get payment on saying you still owe this debt, even if you've paid it before. And so identity theft can come from a sort of number of different ways.
Amy, before we switch, actually, Heather, can we go back to the previous slide? I'm sorry, I'm looking at this and realizing that we should have had a bullet point below the first one. So obviously, if a trafficker has, withheld or used a survivor's identity documents, but the other thing that you have to think is that if the client that you're working with has ever experienced homelessness or has, been couch hopping, folks often have to flee where they are and leave behind everything that they have, right? So oftentimes that includes identity documents. And I'm thinking of a particular client who, was kicked out of her house and had her identity documents. She left them behind and somebody got their hands on them. And then this whole nightmare of a process began. So any clients who have been unstably housed in any way, you should be thinking about these issues or the potential for these issues going forward.
Jess, we see that when I go out as, part of HTPP's outreach, we go out to so many community partners and different shelters that are working with housing unstable or homeless populations. And yeah, that is something I hear so often, that something was stolen, they don't know where it is, during that process of trying to find a stable place to sleep, they lost things or had them taken. So that's a really important. So now we're going to move on to what you can do to assist. And we hope, this last section provided kind of an overview of flags you should be looking for and an understanding of how consumer issues might arise. But now we really want to talk about how to start that conversation with survivors that you're working with, and give you some tools to screen for consumer law issues in human trafficking cases. And again, I just wanted to, this is an active link and I can send this out in our follow-up email, but there is a great consumer rights screening tool. You can see it's more geared towards domestic violence advocates and attorneys, but it is definitely applicable to the work that we do in the anti-trafficking community. And this is another great tool from the Center for Survivor Agency and Justice, as well as from the National Consumer Law Center. And it is a very detailed tool that gives you a lot of ideas about questions you can ask, how to start conversations. And I mean, I would recommend taking a look at this and thinking about how you can incorporate some of the questions from this great tool into the screening that you're doing at your local agency, or if you're an attorney, to again, just get some ideas about how to comfortably and in a survivor-centered and empowering way, talk about debt, about fraud, about identity theft, and other consumer issues with individuals you're working with.
I'll just mention that one of the ways that I often approach talking to folks about kind of leading into kind of their consumer issues, especially when they have come to get legal services through other means, is having a conversation about goals and about budgeting. And so often talking about, well, what are your financial goals, or what are the things that you potentially want to accomplish? And this is where you might get, oh, I would really love to get an apartment in my own name, but I don't think that I don't think I can, because I know that I have this debt out there. Or they start saying, well, I have to repay this debt for this credit card that I co-signed for, or I have a payment plan for something or other that I have to keep paying on. And kind of helping, if you're helping somebody assemble a budget, it can be sort of a lead into figuring out all the kind of consumer issues that they potentially have.
Amy, I think that what you're saying is so crucial, because I know that the people who are listening in on this webinar, and I know the people who are on the listserv, and I know that they do this kind of forward thinking with clients. What do you want for your life going forward? I want to get this job. I want to get this apartment, all of those things. But if we're not talking, obviously about criminal record, but if we're also not talking or asking questions about consumer law, we're really missing an opportunity to make, a difference in a client's life, because we're all having these conversations, but we're not thinking necessarily, I'm kind of laying this on myself, we're not necessarily thinking about how this could be the primary impediment to all of those short and long-term goals.
Mm-hmm. I'll just say that when I'm meeting with people, if I hear any of the red flags we just discussed, if anything pops up, and actually I think I'm just beginning to try to make it a routine with every client I speak to, I do ask, have they checked their credit reports? A lot of times people haven't even thought about that, or they're using, some app, maybe that doesn't give them a full picture, or just shows them a credit score. And it's really something that we can do for individuals who might not have access to a secure computer, who might not be able to go to that website and print things out securely, feel comfortable checking their credit reports. That's a step that we as attorneys and advocates can help somebody take, and it gives you, as we'll turn to in the next slides, a great overview of really what somebody's situation is.
So I have absolutely pulled credit reports for clients with them on the phone. I've had them on the phone, and they've given me verbal authorization, and so I am able to act as if I am them when I am going through the questions that annualcreditreport.com has. Annualcreditreport.com is the free site that is operated by the government, and so like freecreditreport.com or some of those other sites, those are not actually the site that folks should be using. In general, nationwide, the law is you get access to one credit report from each of the three credit bureaus, TransUnion, Equifax, Experian, per year. Currently, because of the CARES Act that was signed into law in early April, people can actually get one free credit report per week right now. But if we're kind of outside of a global pandemic sort of lens on things, Maryland actually gives consumers in the state the ability to access a second copy of their credit report. Getting access to that Maryland law second copy is not as simple as going to annualcreditreport.com. there's a DLLR, or well, the Department of Labor maintains a website that has some instructions about that you can use in order to try to you have to go to each of the bureaus directly in order to get that second copy. And we have definitely seen clients that have had, especially when there's been an identity theft issue, that have had difficulty pulling credit reports, because you often have to produce or remember, what was the amount of the payment for the loan for that car that you got in 2011, or which of these 3 addresses or which of these 5 addresses was an address that you lived at, and so none of them is an option. But if there's been identity theft and there's an address on your credit report that you don't actually know about, well, then you won't answer that question correctly. There are avenues for folks to get access to their credit reports, even if they've experienced identity theft, but it does require an additional level of advocacy in order to actually access them. And so this is absolutely something that folks can help survivors get access to these credit reports, especially when there's going to be an extra level of effort that's going to be needed to get the credit reports, because these are really, really useful tools. The one other thing that I want to mention, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Amy.
The one other thing that I want to mention is that there are the 3 credit bureaus. These are consumer reporting. These are 3 consumer reporting agencies, but there are a lot of other consumer reporting or consumer reports that are out there, and so there is a rent systems report that landlords potentially make reports to if they've had a negative experience with a tenant. And folks are entitled to be able to get that report. And there is a check systems report that where banks make reports about closed accounts that maybe that won't appear on the credit report, that they closed an account with a negative balance, but it would appear on the check systems report. And then banks, every time they open a new checking account for somebody, they look at the check systems report. And so there are, I think, something over 100 of these consumer reporting agencies, which is, really crazy. And it is just downright impossible to sort of maintain, even if you do this for a living. It can be really impossible to sort of maintain knowledge about information each company might potentially have on you. But at least the consumerfinance.gov, the CFPB link that's in there, that will help link you to some of those other reporting agencies if you think that there might be an agency that has something where you want to pull that check system report to figure that out.
Amy, just to be clear, you're saying that there are a whole host of other reporting agencies that don't factor into the TransUnion, Equifax, or Experian scores, but that might be impacting our clients.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And Amy, one other thing I'd love to hear your comments on, as you noted, you've pulled people's credit reports via phone. I've done the same thing when I've done visits with community partners and other service providers, meeting with clients. I've pulled credit reports. I've also pulled them over the phone for individuals. We're happy to do that if you'd like to refer people to MVLS. But one thing I hear constantly is that my clients are like, oh, my credit's fine. I check it on Credit Karma. Could you talk a little bit about some of the apps that are available out there and how they can report?
Yeah, so that kind of stuff is sort of separately frustrating to me, because things like Credit Karma these are free sites that are operating because what they want to do is they want to capture as much information about consumers as they can, and so using apps like Credit Karma means that you are giving Credit Karma, since you're not paying for it, they're doing other stuff with your data. And so I don't love things like Credit Karma for folks. I would rather that they use the site that is operated by the government, but it doesn't give you access to that credit score. And the thing that can be tricky to kind of grapple with is that we all have these credit scores, and we often think about them as the sort of numerical value of who we are as a person, and whether our credit score has gone up or down. That is an indicator of how good we're doing as a human being, which is obviously ridiculous. But it still dramatically can impact all of these other areas of our lives, including what I talked about before with getting a job, with getting with the cost of your insurance, with the cost of the credit that you get. with getting an apartment. And so the, I think it's important to pull your credit report and take a look at it for information and figure out if things are accurate or inaccurate. But I also think that it's important not to focus so much on that credit score number, just because it is not the be all and end all of who we are.
Great. Thank you so much, Amy.
So looking at credit reports is, boy howdy, is it is a learned skill. They can be confusing to look at, and kind of figuring out what means what can certainly be tricky. And so if you have the credit report in front of you, you've managed to pull it. Obviously, I want to say that there can be differences between each of what is reported to each of the three credit bureaus, which is why it's great if you can actually pull all three. But you might not always be able to do that. And then things are going to get once you actually pull these reports, things might start to look a little confusing. If a debt was with an original creditor, Synchrony Bank is a lender that services a lot of credit cards for store cards. If you go into Walmart and you get a Walmart credit card, Synchrony Bank is actually the bank that's behind that. But if they don't get paid by a certain time, they actually sell the debt to a debt buyer. And so then the debt buyer is often the one that is collecting on behalf of that Walmart credit card. And so it can be confusing for clients to figure out, oh, the Synchrony account, I don't remember who that was, but they did have a Walmart card. But now that Synchrony account is with LVNV, which is a debt buyer. And so that is something that can be potentially confusing and not necessarily an obvious sign of identity theft. So I will certainly say that if an original creditor gets wind that there might be something related to identity theft, they often sell the debt immediately to a debt buyer because they want to get paid something rather than nothing. And so it certainly is. It's neither indicative or not indicative of an identity theft issue. And then the other thing is that can be really frustrating for clients is that bad debts can stay on your credit for 7 years, and if you ever file for bankruptcy, it stays on your credit for 10 years. And one of the kind of funny things about the way that these get pulled is the date, the sort of last date of any activity isn't necessarily the final date that you might see. It would be 7 years after that, because that could just potentially be the date of last reporting from that creditor to that credit reporting agency. So they are reporting this no payment, so late payment. They're 90 days late, 120 days late, and they report 120 days late on your payment over and over and over again, month after month after month. And so that can sort of make things look a little bit funny. But if you can find the actual last payment, that's what you're actually looking for, is the last payment. And then 7 years after that, one of the easiest ways to help bring somebody's credit score up is doing a Fair Credit Reporting Act letter. What I generally say to people that want to do this for themselves or want to help other folks do this is if you search Fair Credit Reporting Act letter in Google, you will, especially from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, you'll come up with or dispute debt on my credit report letter. You'll often come up with these example letters that are they serve all the same purpose, but you want to send a copy to the creditor and the three credit bureaus. And the other kind of funny thing about this is that the address where you have to send these to the three credit bureaus changes all the time. So it's important to kind of continually look this information up. But if you do that, one easy way to raise somebody's credit score is to send one of these letters to and dispute the debt, or potentially ask to have it removed because it's old now. And that can actually help somebody, because that would potentially mean that something that is negative that is on their credit would actually fall off. So this is an example of something that would give me some pause in terms of if I'm looking at somebody's credit report about how if I'm looking at somebody's credit report about kind of maybe they've been the victim of identity theft. And so there is one car account, and this is under adverse accounts. And this talks about so an adverse account is one that is negatively impacting your credit. And so they're categorized between negative accounts and accounts that are fine generally. But it's going to have an address and some kind of basic information for the debt. And then there's going to be these sort of month categories that'll have to, and you can see kind of at the very bottom, there are a bunch of months with a marked 60-day late, some of them with a 30-day late. And then the two at the very end are marked okay. So this is just sort of, what an adverse account that you might potentially see. But this person's credit report actually had 4 different cars on it, all obtained around a sort of similar time frame. So that to me was an indicator of some potential identity theft issues, because there were a lot of debts. This person didn't necessarily need four cars all at the same time. So that was an indicator. But the top piece is actually the personal information. This is a gold mine for figuring out that there might have been some identity theft, because you can see, hopefully if you kind of zoom in, you can see at the very top that says you've been in our files since July 1st, 1984. And depending on the age of the person, you can't get credit in your own name until you're at least 18. If you do the math, you might figure out, well, this was definitely taken. There's been reports for this person since before they were 18. That's an indicator of some identity theft. If there are a bunch of different names reported, and maybe they never went by those names, or maybe there's some additional last names in there that they never legally had, that could be an indicator. This person had a bunch of different last names. This person has a ton of different addresses, and it's absolutely possible. The lives of the clients that we serve can be transient, but them all being reported to the credit reporting agent, the credit reporting bureau, is an indicator to me that there's a potential issue, because these were all addresses that were associated with their credit. And then we have all of these phone numbers. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 phone numbers that are associated with this credit file. That's a potential indicator of some sort of identity theft. And so sometimes it's just the volume of things, or things that look off that might just jump out to you and say, hey, this is something that I want to think about identity theft for this client. So credit reports, fraud alerts, and freezing accounts. So a fraud alert is where if a creditor is going to help you get is going to help you apply for credit, you're going to get a new car loan, you're going to get a new credit card, something like that, and even potentially getting a bank account, because sometimes banks will pull credit reports in order to open a bank account. They have to do an identity, verify your identity before they can process any applications. There are a variety of reasons why potentially somebody might want to do this, especially if they think that there might be some fraud going into the future. It's a great idea. You can get a temporary one. Anyone can get one that's placed onto your credit file for 1 year. But if you want to get the extended one, which is for 7 years, you have to generally provide a police report or an identity theft report. And there are all kinds of reasons why the clients that we work with might not want to make a police report. And there is an identity theft police report that is available, at least in Maryland, an identity theft police report that you can file online. But one of the critical things is that you have to swear that you don't know who the person is who stole your identity. And this can be really tricky if you obviously know who the person is who stole your identity. And if you do know that, then you have to physically go to a police station and file a police report. And gosh, that can be a lot for a client. So that's just all something to keep in mind. But the other option potentially is a credit freeze. This is something that, because of some law changes that have happened in the last couple of years, it is now free to put a credit freeze onto your credit report and also free to thaw it temporarily or lift the freeze entirely if you choose to. It used to be that this cost money. Now it's free. Anyone can choose to do this. One of the things that I often recommend is that folks that are kind of thinking through all these things might just choose to do a credit freeze, but I generally recommend this to clients when the client is, especially if they're computer savvy, or if they have the ability to come back and get my help to unthaw their credit, or thaw their credit, or lift the freeze, or what have you, because it's pretty straightforward to do online. You have a login, you enter that information, you say, "Yep, I want to lift the freeze, or I want to thaw the freeze temporarily." Straightforward to do. But if the client doesn't have regular access to a computer or a secure computer, this is not something you necessarily want to do at a library. You don't want to be pulling your credit stuff at a library. Then it can be trickier. There are also a number of companies out there like LifeLock and some of those other kind of the credit monitoring agencies. I don't like those for people. I think that they are a waste of money generally. They often say, "Oh, well, we just say that nobody should put credit freezes on because what if you need access to your credit immediately?" And that, that is certainly difficult if you need to get new credit immediately. But with a little bit of thinking ahead, you can put a thaw on the credit a couple of days in advance, and then go and apply for credit if you need to. So this is sort of why I say that it's a good idea for folks that are sort of computer savvy, and not always a great idea for somebody who is not.
And Amy, just to chime in here, I can't tell you how many times I've helped clients do this. Like when I've met with them and they're like, "Oh, I just lost my wallet," or they recently left or escaped a trafficking situation and they don't know if someone is using their documents, don't know if somebody is going to be trying to retaliate or do fraudulent activity, using their information. Being able to put on a credit freeze or a fraud alert via either the computer or doing it over the phone can definitely give the individuals you're working with peace of mind as they're figuring out their credit situation and trying to assess next steps.
So you get access to each of these things, the fraud and the fraud alerts and freezing by going to each of the credit bureaus directly. I will say that again, this is sort of a funny thing where sometimes the information changes in terms of what web page that you have to go to and what phone number you need to call. And so I often just say, just go ahead and look it up because they may have moved it. But certainly a resource that I want to point everybody to is identitytheft.gov. This is operated by the Federal Trade, the FTC. And they have a whole process and a plan that people can follow step by step. It helps kind of keep you organized in the process where you are working to kind of go through the steps to recover from identity theft. All right. So again, the FTC, they have their identity theft. They have a bunch of information that they put out about identity theft in addition to the identitytheft.gov. The Maryland Attorney General has got some great resources and information about identity theft, as does the Maryland Department of Labor. This is again, one of the easiest ways to address identity theft is to get a police report about a stolen identity, and it really helps make the process easier. But all the stuff that I talked about before, there are a lot of reasons why a client might not necessarily want to do that, and so that's just something to go through and talk about with them, and figure out what they're comfortable with, and clients are gonna find this process probably really challenging, just because it is a process that can be very lengthy, and especially if you need to, and especially right now, because for instance, if you need to physically go to the Social Security Administration because you need to get a new Social Security card. Well, you can't physically go to the Social Security Administration right now because the office is closed. And so you might not be able to actually get them to mail it to you at the address where you have, because you have the identity theft problem. And so it really is just, it can certainly feel like a full-time job trying to recover from identity theft.
And MVLS is able to help with some of these things too. So do feel free to give us a call, and you can talk to myself and Amy if any of your clients are grappling with these issues right now.
So I want to say that sort of generally about dealing with debt, dealing with how to help address some of these issues. This is certainly intended to be some information that will give you some thoughts about maybe where to start. But it's absolutely the case that the client should get a consultation with an attorney, ideally an MBLS attorney, or to talk through these kinds of credit issues with them, because there are always going to be things that you are that you're not necessarily going to know about, but there might be legal options that it would be helpful for them to have that consultation and kind of figure out what their options are. And negotiating with creditors is actually definitely one, because one, it can be tricky for clients to manage without help, but also an attorney is far more likely to get a positive result trying to negotiate even a payment plan with a creditor than a client is. And sometimes even somebody who's helping advocate for them, because they will often insist on a power of attorney to be able to talk to them on their behalf, and there can be sort of difficulties with kind of getting that documentation all together, and then there is just less deference paid to clients or individual consumers and other advocates than there is to attorneys, which is, really unfortunate. But it sort of, I have certainly found that I have been able to get payment plans of, say, $25 a month for a client who wanted to repay a debt, and that was not an option that was offered to them at any point, or somebody who was trying to help work with them. And it can also be just helpful that the attorney knows, I need to provide some sort of XYZ that is going to help make this work better or faster. I will say, just sort of as a just a flag, that if the person is going to try to do this, creditors will often say, okay, well, where do you work? And where do you bank, and things like that. And this is information that they will say they won't allow the person to get a payment plan without providing that information, which is not true. They will let people make payment plans, but they will refuse to do it without that information. But they want that because they want to make sure that if later they can garnish a bank account or they can garnish wages. And so it can often be necessary to have an attorney say, nope, we are definitely not going to provide that, if you're looking for that sort of payment plan option. There is a tool that we have used with our clients who are only on, say, disability benefits, only have income that is protected from garnishment. And that includes things like temporary cash assistance, temporary disability, and some other federal benefits. And the client also has to have limited assets, but that means that generally is going to mean that client is not collectible, that a judgment could be potentially obtained in a court against them, but it does mean that they can stop creditor harassment if the attorney says, actually, there is nothing that you're going to be able to get here from this client, and so I would just suggest that you take a long walk off a short pier. And partially because the sort of longstanding relationship that I've had with a number of creditors' attorneys in Maryland, they get a letter from me saying, this client is not collectible, and here's the proof that you need in order to be able to do this. And it generates a reasonable enough response where they say, okay, great, we'll just close our file. But that can be harder for consumers to be able to access themselves.
Hey, Amy, I know we're running short on time, but can you talk just very briefly about the term unbanked? Because I'm hearing that a lot these days.
Oh, yeah.
For, clients who don't even have the option to have a bank account, and what being unbanked, what can be problematic about being unbanked.
Oh man, it's just really expensive to be poor. I mean,
Into that.
So there are so many people in our state who are low income, and one of the things when I was talking before about like the check systems report, and so they have this sort of red mark against them that they haven't even seen, that they don't even know about, but they can't get a bank account. I will say that sometimes people who have a red mark against them might be able to get a MICU. Does offer a one time we'll let you open a new bank account even if you have a bunch of red marks against you, but that's not always guaranteed. But if this is a potential option that I'm just going to throw out there. But so if somebody doesn't have a bank account, this means that they are going to have a variety of problems with say getting benefits deposited into their accounts, they're going to have more expensive options, like if they have to cash a check, they have to go to a check cashing place, and those can come with a wide variety of fees. Clients often wind up using money orders, which can have a cost to them. And so there are all of these sort of additional fees that basically get tacked on to being an unbanked person. And then there are things like Green Dot, which are so there is a bank that it's called Web Bank, that is kind of underlying some of these cards that exist out there that people can get benefits deposited onto, or perhaps even say a tax refund. Oftentimes these will have fees associated with accessing the account, using an ATM, trying to get at the money that's on there, and either usage fees where there's an additional fee for use, or non-usage fees where there's a fee for non-use, or both of those things. And in fact, there is a collection attorney in Maryland who, every time he gets a judgment against anyone, he immediately goes and files with Green Dot, because he's just on the off chance that he can garnish anything that's with Green Dot. He goes trolling there. So it just in general, it's hard and expensive to be poor.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that it is extremely expensive to be poor.
So bankruptcy, absolutely, this is something that it should be a consultation with an attorney. But I will say that many things like coerced debt and issues related to identity theft, if there's a big BGE bill that the person really can't sort of figure out how to get around, or maybe doesn't want to get a police report about, or something like that, bankruptcy may be a way to resolve some of these debt options without some of the trauma that might be associated with kind of other avenues of addressing them. The biggest question that clients are always ask is, am I going to lose everything? And in general, the answer to that, for almost everybody that we see anyway, the answer is no. There are protections where people get to keep a certain number of their assets in order to kind of move forward after a bankruptcy. And this could potentially include a house. This could potentially include a car. It could include money in a bank account. It would include retirement assets. And so there are a number of things that are, and it includes things like tools of the trade that somebody needs to be able to do their job, and in addition to some other categories that are protected. So the answer to will I lose everything is, direct them to have a consultation with an attorney, but not necessarily. And there are ways to protect things. There are two main different kinds of bankruptcies. There are actually a number of different kinds of bankruptcy, but the two main different kinds of bankruptcy that a normal individual might potentially use are a Chapter 7 bankruptcy and a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. Chapter 7 is often referred to as the liquidation bankruptcy, and it's where all of your debts are wiped out and you get that fresh start. And this is one that is the most useful for the low-income clients that we serve, because it means that they are going to definitely get that fresh start that is really going to help them out. there are income and asset limitations to the Chapter 7, and if the person is above those things, then they would potentially have to do the Chapter 13, which is the repayment bankruptcy, and that puts somebody on a 3 or 5 year very strict budget, and they have to make a payment to the court, and then the court distributes it to their creditors. The one occasion that we often wind up seeing low-income folks having to do a Chapter 13 is if they have something like a debt owed to the state that they are not going to be able to make payments with directly because of just the demands of that, say, the Central Collection Unit of Maryland might place on the terms of repayment, and they want to be able to get their license back. And so in those instances, it might be the case where we might suggest a Chapter 13. But that's not always a universal thing. So again, kind of figuring out what the right option is for somebody, that's a case to refer to an attorney.
And I just want to note, we are a little bit over, but we appreciate everyone who's staying on, through all this important information. We obviously had a lot that we wanted to share with you, but I know, Amy has a few additional slides to share, and then we should be wrapping up hopefully in the next 10 minutes.
Yes, absolutely. So student loans, man, they're tricky. But figuring out whether they're federal or private is going to impact what options the person potentially has. And so you're going to figure out whether they're federal or private by doing two things. One is going to studentaid.gov, where all of the student loans, the federal student loans the person got, are going to be listed, and it's going to include, when they took them out and what school they were at. And the other thing that you do is you pull a credit report, because that's generally where the private student loans you're going to see those. The options that are available are much greater when you have federal student loans. One of the biggest or one of the absolute best options for people, so student loan lenders often want to push people into forbearance, which just means you don't have to make a payment for a certain amount of time. But what you genuinely want is a loan repay, or if you've fallen behind, you can get these rehabilitation options, and then you can get into these repayment plans that result in it saying income-based repayment or income-driven repayment are the two different kinds. But these payment plans can potentially mean that your payment that you make on your student loan is zero, and so and that counts as a payment, and it has a positive impact on your credit, because even though you've paid $0, it is though you've made a payment that month. And forbearance doesn't negatively necessarily impact your credit, but it doesn't have a positive impact the way that, say, a theoretical payment even of $0 has. And you have to apply for these income-driven or income-based repayment plans every year. But for instance, this is one of the best options available to folks, and they might be able to get, kind of depending on the kind of program that they're in, they might be able to get some sort of public service loan forgiveness, or they might be able to get their loans forgiven after 20 or 25 years. And none of these are options that are available if you're getting forbearance. But all of these are only things that are available for federal student loans. They're not available for private. So that's why it's important to kind of figure out what beast you're dealing with. Bail bonds are certainly a thing that is, they frustrate me so much. So people get bail bonds when somebody is in jail, either themselves or someone that they care about. And a bail bond, or in order to get the bail bond company, in order to post the bail, you have to give them 10%. Or a promise to pay them 10% of the bail. And so if the bail is set at $50,000, then the actual bail bond is going to be for $5,000. And then there is a law in Maryland that says that you have to put down 1%. And so that is going to be $500. And then you make a payment plan on basically the remainder of the 9% of the amount of the bail. There have been a number of changes related to bail bonds in recent years in terms of how often they're granted because of some guidance that came out from the Attorney General's office. We certainly see them a lot less often than we used to. So we still do see them, but interestingly, the Attorney General came out with some guidance that said that bail bonds should be used less often because they are effectively just a wealth transfer from low-income communities to bail bond companies. But this has resulted that a lot of folks that might have that should just be released on their own recognizance are actually just being held in jail rather than released on bail or otherwise. And so this is sort of not necessarily been the outcome that I believe that the Attorney General's office was looking to suggest, but kind of where we are in Maryland. But people still do get bail bonds. Bail bond companies still exist. They still sue clients in the district court every single day. So, but we just see them less often. But there are a lot of laws that govern the collection of bail bonds. There's the court laws and then the Maryland Insurance Administration, because bail bonds are an insurance product effectively. They also govern the collection of bail bonds. And something that, you might not necessarily know looking at them, but say a bail bond is not allowed to contain a confessed judgment clause, and they have to lay out the repayment schedule. And if they've done these sorts of things, then they are not necessarily entitled to, if they have not done the things that they're required to do, they're not necessarily entitled to collect on them. And so it's one of the reasons why if somebody is facing debt collection for a bail bond, they should definitely get some legal assistance. And related to bail bonds and other kinds of debt are body attachments. And certainly we have seen a reduction in the number of body attachments over the last couple of years. There's been a lot of advocacy done to reduce creditor and the court's reliance on using them. But it is effectively getting an arrest warrant when somebody has failed to appear in court to talk about what their income or assets are, but really it's creditors utilizing utilizing an arrest process in order to get payments. Because when a body attachment is set, there is generally a bond amount that is set. That money does not go to the court. It goes back to the company that the debt is owed to. In general, credit card companies, banks, they don't use this tactic because they don't want to be seen or associated with arresting their clients. But companies that don't necessarily care about their public image, like bail bonds and landlords, they're much more likely to use the body attachment process. The process is just really odious because somebody gets picked up. In all likelihood, they don't actually even know that they have a judgment against them because they were never served properly. There has been a law change in the last year that is an attempt to help address this, but we'll sort of see if that helps reduce the number of body attachments going forward. But they get picked up, processed. Usually in Baltimore City, they get processed at the city jail, and then they get taken to a commissioner, where the commissioner makes a determination about whether or not they should stay in jail, or whether they should be released, or if telling them to cough up some money, or in order to be released. There are a variety of different options that happen at the level of the commissioner, and then the person has to, if they don't get released, then they go before a judge the next time that the court is in session. And so this can potentially mean that if you get picked up on a Friday night, you could spend the entire weekend in jail. And just as obviously as you might expect, if you get arrested and then lose your job because you spent the weekend in jail, or potentially lose custody of your kids, this is certainly part of the cycle of poverty.
Amy, I love that you said that in terms of, all of these things are part of the cycle of poverty. So if you get detained on a Friday and then you miss your job on Saturday and then you lose your job, or you can't pick up your kids and then they think you're neglectful and then they get taken away from you. I mean, we have to start kind of thinking more kind of collectively about this kind of work.
Yeah, I mean, and it's really challenging. So Jess said something interesting to me when we were preparing for this, that she has a client who she thinks is never going to be able to have good credit ever again. And I said, well, that's not actually true. There are avenues that your client that can be taken to get your client to build credit. And one of the big ones is going to be pulling the credit report, contesting any of the negative charges on there, disputing them. Saying that, and if there are specifics either related to providing proof of identity theft or proof that this is not this person's debt, that can suddenly wipe out a whole bunch of different things, negative reports on a credit report. And I will sort of pause momentarily to say there's that highlighted piece at the bottom: avoid for-profit credit repair companies, as they are not a good option for folks. They are not looking to help folks in any way that I think is useful. But one of the things that I often recommend to folks that really want to start building their credit, and this can be true of somebody who is, say, emerging from bankruptcy and is not able to get a credit card, a normal credit card, or just anyone who is looking to do that. Secured credit cards are an option, and I will say that there are so there's a list of a bunch of different secured credit cards on this NerdWallet site. I will say that there are some potential drawbacks. What a secured card means is that either you provide the credit card company a deposit, where say you send them $300 and you can only spend up to that $300 limit. Or you link the card with your bank account. And one of the best ones that people often suggest is this Capital One secured card. And when Capital One had a security breach a couple of years ago, everybody who had a Capital One card, well, they lost their credit card number was lost in that security breach. But anyone who had a secured card with Capital One, they also lost their bank account number that was also and there can be a variety of difficult issues in recovering when you've got credit card fraud versus bank account fraud, and it can be really challenging. So I just sort of say that as a caveat, but that secured cards are an option. But one of the things is just in general, slowly building new credit, using it responsibly, using no more than about either 1/3 or 1/2. I generally recommend 1/3, using no more than 1/3 of a credit card that you get out, using it responsibly, paying it off every single month. There is this not accurate thought that many people have, that if they put something on a card and then kind of pay it off slowly over time, that actually helps them build credit, but it doesn't. That is, I think, actually something that credit card companies probably put out to make money off of people. Instead, if you put something onto it and you want to use only about 1/3 of the total amount of credit, and then you pay it off every month, groceries, etc., this can be a really remarkable way to start showing, oh, this person is using credit responsibly and thus building positive credit up.
Thank you so much. I realize we are a bit more over than we intended, but I would love to just pop back to the case scenario for just a minute, and Amy, maybe give us just a very high level view of what you would want to talk to Dee more about, given the information that's shared in this particular story that an experience that she's had.
So, I mean, the first thing that we're going to want to do is try to figure out what her process is for getting her identity documents back, getting her social security card, getting her driver's license. That's going to be a big hurdle. Pulling her credit report, taking a look at what's on the credit report, potentially disputing those items, potentially getting, if she's willing, a police report, an identity theft, and it wouldn't be a quote unquote identity theft police report because she knows who stole her identity, but she'd have to swear out another affidavit against Keith. And so, she's going to have some medical bills. There are some resources specifically in that, or some suggestions in that secondary handout about medical bills, about dealing with them. Hospitals are required to maintain these financial assistance programs. And because of a law change that happened just this year that's going to go into effect on October 1, those financial assistance programs are actually going to be expanding, which is going to be a big deal for everybody who is 500% of federal poverty and below are going to have access to a variety of new and improved financial assistance programs in Maryland for hospital bills. But she's got this negative debt from her landlord. There are, oh man, when landlords come after people in debt collection court, those have to be gone over with a fine-tooth comb, because sometimes they have not provided enough or accurate proof of things. So it's going to be important to kind of look for any lawsuits that have been filed against her. So, I mean, she's going to have a lot of things that she's going to want to tackle in dealing with this. And so if she's ready, like, we can start going through the steps. And if she wants to take her time or deal with something else in her life, well, then you've planted the seed, and hopefully she'll come back and talk to you more about it.
Great. I just want to say a huge thank you. This was such an informative presentation, Amy. And I know, I run down to Amy's office when we're actually in the office quite often to ask questions that I've gotten from clients when I'm out doing my outreach work, providing legal consultations in the community. And we're so happy to have her expertise available to everyone who's working with trafficking survivors in Maryland. So,
Amy, thank you so much. Thank you.
We look forward.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
We look forward to hearing from you in this post-webinar survey that you'll be getting. And here is everyone's contact information. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And as always, you can send clients directly MVLS's way by giving me a call or shooting me an email, as well as reaching out to our intake line. So again, thank you so much, Amy. Thank you so much, Jessica. Just a few quick housekeeping things. I do want to remind the audience that MVLS intake is remaining open through our dedicated phone lines and website right now during the coronavirus closures. We are closed through June 5th. Our plan right now is to be reopening partially on June 8th, but you can always reach out to us on these lines or online if you need assistance. And we would definitely encourage you to follow us on social media as well for the latest updates, information, and community resources. If you are an attorney who is interested in volunteering, we are still seeking attorneys at this time, and we anticipate as things begin to reopen that there is going to be so much need for legal help throughout Maryland as people are grappling with things like non-payment of rent, eviction, consumer issues, just all of the collective hardship that everyone has been going through is going to really heighten the need for legal services. So we would encourage you to volunteer with MVLS. We always have cases available through our pro bono portal, which can be accessed on our website. And we are, of course, always trying to provide more trainings for the community to learn more about the various issues that we're working on. I'd like to highlight on June 4th, Jess and I will be back to talk about the True Freedom Act, which expanded the vacature law here in Maryland. And also, yeah, moment for a big cheer for that. And we'll also be talking about some additional laws that passed that are going to open up some additional criminal record relief options for survivors. So we hope you will join us on June 4th for that discussion. I think we need to begin scheduling our webinars for not just an hour, but an hour and a half, because we always have so much we want to share. And as you can see, there's other MVLS trainings. You can always check our calendar for trainings on various issues and topics. You can also access all of our recorded trainings through MVLS's website, and we do have the entire database and library of the Human Trafficking Prevention Project series on intersectionality available on our website for viewing and for download. And with that, I'll just leave you with a link to sign up to become a volunteer. I hope everyone's staying healthy and safe in these challenging times, and we look forward to connecting with you soon. Thank you so much.